Hi, my name is Heidi Bylsma, and I just want to welcome you to the Thin Within class for 2014. It's an online Bible study of Thin Within Workbook number 1, Rebuilding God's Temple. I am so excited to be studying with you, partly because we're going to be taking our time through this material with a slightly different focus than I've ever gone through it before. As if you've been visiting the blog for any length of time, you know that God has been working on me to do a lot of renewing of my mind, and I've been sharing that with you all and challenging you to do the same. So as we go through the Thin Within workbook material together, that focus is going to be a part of what will saturate our time together. We will be renewing our minds with God's truth. Scripture says in Romans 12:2 that we are transformed by the renewing of our minds. You probably wanted to be involved in this class because you want transformation at some level. You either want to be thinner, or maybe you don't want to get any thinner. You want to have a healthy view of food and your body, and you struggle with an eating disorder. Whatever it might be, you at some level have a desire for transformation, and I believe that this is a good and godly desire. The trick is so very often we focus on the outer man, on our bodies, and the renewing of our mind is what actually causes transformation inside and out. As we are changed inside, we are going to experience changes in our outward actions and in the fruit of our lives, in the results we see. Whether that has to do with our character or our physical appearance, it can have to do with all kinds of things. Our God is in the business of transformation, and the way that we participate with Him is we dive headlong into His Word, into inviting Him to help us to think His thoughts after Him. So that is the number one thing that is going to be affecting us as we go through this material, that concept, that idea, that value of renewing our minds. The second thing that is going to be a part of what I share and remind you of as we go through this material is failure. What is the view that we have of failure? So very often we bring our view of failure from performance-based experiences we have, like dieting, or almost anything else in our society, into our faith walk. And the truth is, failure takes on a very different definition when we ask God to show us how He views failure. For example, our God is a redeemer. So in His hands, He can take what we think of as a failure and He can redeem it, transform it, change it so that failure actually becomes a victory. And I know that sounds crazy, but I hope to show you that as our time together unfolds. We're going to invite God to change our definitions of failure so that they are more in line with the Word of God and with His way of thinking. The third thing that is going to affect our movement through this material is we're going to go deeply into understanding better the character of our God. Why does that even matter? Because how we view our God has a huge impact on how much we are going to grant Him access to our lives, including the areas of food, eating, and self-image. We want to develop an understanding of His character, His providence, His grace, His sovereignty, His wisdom, His goodness, all of the attributes that make our God who He is and that make Him intimately acquainted with us, inviting us to step into a greater story than just where we end up when we go on diets. My food, my way, my size, my. We're going to be focusing on these three things: the renewing of our minds, renewing our minds about failure. We're going to have a good look at failure, what it is, and how it can be one of the best tools that God can use in our lives to change us, to encourage us, to build us into the people that we hope to be. If we don't go through failure, we're going to miss it. We want to invite Him to let us experience all He has in mind in failure, and then that third thing, the providence of God. So those three things are going to be foundational support for us as we go through this material. Lesson 1, I love Lesson 1 because it is on hope. And it's my desire that even now, as I've shared with you so far in this video, you are beginning to feel kind of that combustion of hope popping up inside of you, that you are sensing that yes, God is doing a new thing. You have never been in this exact place before, not with this knowledge, this wisdom, this set of experiences or support. You have never been in this precise place before. This is new. By definition, it's new. God is doing, ever-present, active, is doing a new thing right now. And he's inviting you to participate and to believe him that he is. That which he began, Philippians 1:6 tells us, he will complete. We want to participate with him in that. Right now, God is doing a new thing. Are you struggling with thoughts of, I've been here before, I've done this before, I lost some weight and I couldn't keep it off, or I'll never be that size or whatever? Those kinds of thoughts right there are exactly the kinds of thoughts that we're going to learn to take captive. We're going to take them captive, like it says in 2 Corinthians, and submit them to obedience to Christ. The weapons of our warfare are not worldly. We have divine power to demolish strongholds. So we're going to start living like the more than conquerors that we are. We're going to put on our armor of God, and we're going to recognize lies where they exist that we've been believing, or where we have allowed little t truths to define us. Things that I did in the past, like, yeah, I lost weight and then I gained it. That's a little t truth. It really happened. But does it have any right to define me now? No. My God, big T truth, can apply his victory, his strength, his wisdom, his resurrection power into my life right now, and he wants to. Those little t truths of my past do not get to define what happens now. What happens now is totally dependent upon, will I keep my eyes on him and welcome his influence, his power, his leading in my life? So I hope that that fills you with a little bit of hope as well. As we look at the scriptures together over the next 12 or 13 weeks, you will also notice that God calls such interesting characters to be the people that he brings his truth to the rest of his people with. For instance, think about this for a moment. If you're familiar with the Song of Songs or Song of Solomon in the Old Testament, it's a beautiful book of poetry, very intimate in many ways. Do you know who wrote that poem? I'm sure you could guess if you don't know already. Solomon. Solomon wrote in that poem about the beauties and wonders of marital fidelity, one woman, one man for all time type of thing. And yet, here was a man who had a bazillion wives and concubines. It's interesting to me that God would take a tool such as Solomon, an imperfect, failing, in-your-face opposite of what he's writing about type of person, and use him to pen a poem about marital fidelity. That's the kind of God we serve. Not only that, there's another really big example. That's my Old Testament example, now a New Testament example. In the New Testament, Paul, before he was the Apostle Paul, was Saul. Saul was a Christian killer, Christian hater. He believed that he was serving God by being zealous against the church as it was growing in its infancy. So he pursued Christians and killed them. And in fact, he was on his way to do more damage to the newly forming Christian church when God called him to stop dead in his tracks, cast him with blind eyes, and told him he would suffer for Christ. God then used this man who had been a Christian killer to write a huge chunk of the New Testament so that for all time we would be encouraged by his words. Here's a man who became the number one, both in terms of the first and in terms of far-reaching missionary of all time. Here, this man was trying to stomp out Christianity, and he became one of the igniters, the primary igniter of that very faith that he tried to stomp out. God takes the things that are not and makes them to be. He calls things into being. I mean, if he called the whole universe into existence, can he not call into my life an obedient spirit? I got to cooperate with him, though. And so I want to encourage you that we have reason to have hope. Our God doesn't wait for us to become perfect and then decide he's pleased with us. In fact, Romans 5:8 tells us that he demonstrated his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He didn't wait for us to get our acts together. He didn't wait for us to string together 3 months of 0 to 5 eating and before he decided to love us and before he decided to demonstrate that love. In fact, Ephesians chapter 1 tells us that he chose you before the foundation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight, that in love he predestined you to be adopted as his child. That is so amazing. He did it for the praise of his glory because it gives him great joy, for his great pleasure. It gives him joy to be in a relationship with you and with me. We do not need to be perfect. He knows we're not perfect. We can't fool him. We can't fool ourselves. We can't fool others. We definitely cannot fool the God of this universe. And so the reason why I believe this is a message of hope is because it tells us I don't have to wait to pull my act together before I can enjoy intimacy with an amazing, loving, incredible God who's perfectly intimate with me. He provided Christ so that that blood sacrifice could be applied to my account so that I could enter and come before the throne of grace with confidence to receive the mercy and help that I need as I need it. There is much to feel hope about. As we go into this material together in week 1, I trust that you will allow God to search your heart. Invite him to show you if there's any lies that you believe that are standing in the way of you experiencing the hope that he intends for you to experience. He wants to infuse you with that sense of joy, that peace, that hope, that you would know that he is doing a new thing. He is making a way in the wasteland. He's making streams in the desert. He is doing this now. He's calling you to this. He's calling you to believe him, to believe what he says about you, to believe what he says about his character as well, and to believe what he is saying to you about this journey. This journey is just a small beginning to what is ahead of you for the rest of your days on this planet. None of us are going to be perfect. None of us will have arrived until the day we step into glory and he completes us and he perfects us. So enough with this perfection talk. I'm letting God down. No, you're not. You were never holding him up in the first place. Let's let the pressure be off of us. Instead, let's be in the moment. Let's invite him to show us where we need to believe him more completely, more accurately, more truthfully. And let's ask him to open our eyes to what is ahead for us in this amazing journey. It's about so much more than your body, that there is an adventure ahead, and it's not just that you're going to be in a size dress or pants that you want to be in. That is nothing compared to what God intends for this journey to be for you. Believe it.